Hello, welcome back. If you're new, my name's Cassandra. Today we are talking about the realities of trying to grow a year's worth of food, the struggles, the failures, but also some of the successes, the joy that comes from it, and just all the experience you get from tackling new problems, experiencing new problems, and the happiness that you get when all of the hard work starts to pay off. You can see big cabbages, lots of food coming out of the garden, and you're actually finally getting that food out of the garden into the kitchen, and you're starting to preserve. So let's go ahead and hop in and show you guys all the things that's been happening around here and all the things I've learned, some the hard way. I really needed to do something about these tomatoes, and I don't have any more tomato cages to put them in, and I had a whole bunch here. This whole area was kind of an area in the beginning of the spring where we planted some cherry tomatoes. It looked like they all died, so we replanted this area with new cherry tomatoes, and then everything took off. So this is like, in this little section here, there's like 7 or 8 cherry tomato plants that are all just like right on each other. So I just took 2 T-posts that we had extra from the orchard project, and I save my baler's twine from the straw bales that we get, and I just tied a bunch of them together and kind of like ran them back and forth between the 2 poles, kind of did like my own Florida weave, and weaved my tomato plants up in between these strings or baler's twine. And that was my project for today. I also went and I did have a couple tomato cages, I think 5 or 6 of them, that I put some tomatoes in other sections of the garden, like over here and over here, that really needed to get up off the ground. And the kids helped me weed a little bit, but it's really hot, so we are going to end it here and hang out and do some pool stuff with the kids. So this is where I'm ending it for today, but nonetheless, still a productive garden day. I got all the tomatoes up and pruned, and then tomorrow I'm going to come back and get all the blight off of them and treat them for blight, because that's something that needs to be taken care of. Don't ask me why all of the tomatoes that were on the ground, laying on the ground, had no airflow or ventilation or anything like that, didn't get blight on them. But all of my tomatoes that are up on the tomato trellises or cattle panels got it really bad. So I pruned them as best as I could. I'm going to come back tomorrow though and give it a really good in-depth pull everything out, get it out of here, and then spray them down. So I'll bring you guys with that for tomorrow, but that's a project for then. Blight is a disease that your tomato plants can get. It usually happens when you have really humid weather, a lot of wet weather, and your tomato plants can't really breathe. There's not a lot of airflow through them. They're really thick, bushy plants. I have done much better this year than in years past of keeping my tomatoes up. This is the first year I have the tomato trellises up, and I've done a much better job of keeping them pruned and taken care of so that airflow can come through. However, we've talked about in other videos about how wet of a spring we had. It was great for the orchard that we put in this year and great for a lot of things, but it was terrible for other things, and the tomato plants being one of them. I get blight every year. However, it's usually not until the last like 2 weeks of the season, so I've never treated it before, because by the time it happens, it's too late in the season for it to affect my plants and the yield or anything like that. This year was a very different story. We had a month or a month and a half where out of like 60 days, it rained almost 50 of the days, and we're talking downpours. And then we had really hot weather, hotter than we've ever had here in Wisconsin, at least much hotter than we normally have. It was like 90 degrees, 95 degrees, which is almost unheard of in our area. So those 2 conditions made the blight just thrive this year. So I picked all of the affected pieces of the plants off, put them in my bucket, and you don't want those in the garden. You don't want to put those in the compost because the blight will continue to spread. So I just wanted to pick those off, get them in the bucket, carry them way off away from the garden. And then in this spray bottle here, I'm spraying on water, just soap, and a little bit of baking soda. And this took care of my blight problem wonderfully. A couple days later, about a week later, my plants looked great. My tomatoes started to ripen, and it looked like a much better, much happier plants. These are our fall garden raised beds here. I have another batch of green beans growing in here. I have some snap peas that are just starting to peek up out of the soil here. We also have more brassicas in here, and I am babying this bed a lot more than I have my garden because I want to make sure I'm not repeating the same mistakes. So I'm going ahead and fertilizing with my favorite True Organics. I get this from Menards. It's great. I'm going to take my garden weasel here and go ahead and work that fertilizer into the soil, and then I'm going to go ahead and get the sprinkler on it, let this watered, or get this watered, and really hope that this bed does really well for me. I have more peppers in here, and I'm hoping that these peppers do better than the ones in the garden, because those are one of the things that are failing this year. With the change in humidity, my plants, or my little peppers, basically after they are fertilized, they're basically just shriveling up and dying off of the plant, which I've never had happen to me before. This is a really good example of why I always harvest my tomatoes right as they start to turn, because you'll get a really great tomato and then somebody else got to it first. Other animals, way easier to see a bright red tomato. They know it's ripe. They're gonna go for it because it tastes good. So as soon as things start to blush, at least for me personally, I'll take them. We've been fighting a lot of chipmunks and other small rodents here, and the occasional chicken does come in here, and tomatoes are one of their favorite things to eat. Once again, very easy for them to see. So I'm gonna go through and pick everything that's blush, and since I have treated for blight, you can see how much better my tomato plants look. I do think I was pretty successful at it. I do see a little bit more leaves that probably should be pulled off, but overall they look much healthier, much happier. And I've noticed since I've done that, actually, it might be a coincidence, I don't know, but a lot of my tomatoes are starting to ripen now. I think since we've done that, it's been about a week, maybe a little over a week, and I think the tomatoes plants themselves finally have enough energy to push into actually ripening the fruit, that trying to fight off these bacteria that are taking all over them. So I'm happy that I took the time to treat them and I didn't just kind of give in to myself and say, ugh, maybe this year isn't my year. I'm happy that I fought back, because now anything, no matter how small I get off of it, it's gonna feel a lot better. And now I know I can treat it much earlier in the season if it happens to me again, or just be more mindful of it. And the second I see it in years after this, I can say, you know what, it didn't take me that much time or that much energy to just treat it, and then just do it right away. So that's just my lesson learned this season. And if that's a lesson I learned this season, that is it. And I've learned that the hard way this season in multiple things. I noticed squash bugs early in the season. I thought I had taken care of it. I thought that just picking off the bugs and the larvae, putting the toads in here, which we talked about in other videos, got rid of a lot of my squash bug issues, but they came back with a vengeance, and all of my squash are gone. I'm not gonna get anything. I got 2 zucchini this season, and that's it. I don't think I'm getting any pumpkins, any squash. Other than that, my zucchini plants, they actually ate right out of the ground. They were completely detached from the ground. So lessons learned: when you see things, just go all in the second you see it. Keep an eye on it and pay a closer eye to it than what you think you need to, because I just kind of thought that I had taken care of it without really taking a deep dive into it and investigating all the way. And that cost me all of my squash this season, which is unfortunate, but if it had to happen, it has to happen. And now, like I said, years after this, I'll be much more aware of the squash bugs and the blight, things like that, and other issues too that are just kind of like the blight, like the squash bugs, where if I see it, I'm going to attack it right away. I'm going to keep on it for, you know, a couple days or a couple weeks, whatever that takes, to make sure that the issue is taken care of. I did learn that lesson though with our Japanese beetles. I attacked the problem right away. I went and got some Japanese beetle traps. I was picking them off and throwing them into soapy water. When that became too much, I went and got some Japanese beetle traps. I put them out in the orchard because they were destroying all of the berry plants that we put in, and I've been switching out those traps about once a week for the past 3 or 4 weeks, and our raspberry plants look much healthier, much better. There are a lot less Japanese beetles out there actually now, so I'm glad I learned the lesson, and it only had to take me almost losing all of my tomatoes and me losing all of my squash before I lost all of my raspberries out there. So lessons learned, that's what I've learned this season, but I'm gonna go ahead and harvest. So this is exactly what I'm talking about with my squash. I'm just gonna go ahead and pull this. It's done for. If you look here, you can tell at the actual stem that's coming out of the ground, it's dead here. And you can see maybe we have some different bugs in here, but when I pulled my other squash and started digging around in here, I found a bunch of larvae living inside the plant. So I'm just gonna run. The one piece of fruit it had on it is rotting away. So we're just gonna throw this to the chickens. The chickens will eat all the bugs. I did put diatomaceous earth on all of my other viney plants. I was worried about them getting over to my pickles. That's what I was really worried about, so I put them all on here. I put them on all my other squash plants, even though I think they're already done for. They don't even have fruit on them, and we're nearing the end of the season for us. So no matter what ends up happening this year, I'm still really proud of what has come out of the garden so far. I'm grateful for what I have, because every little bit that we get out of here, even if it's not exactly what I had hoped or imagined, it is still something. It is still moving toward the goal of being more self-sufficient. And I think that we can lose sight of that sometimes. I know I definitely have. So I'm saying this as a reminder for you, but even as a reminder for me, some years are just going to be harder. Some years we're going to have more issues, but the more issues we face, the better and a more well-rounded gardener we're going to be in the following seasons. Experience makes us better, it makes us more well-rounded, and it's going to up our success rate even in harder seasons that are going to come after this. So I'm grateful. I've had some good successes. My brassicas look great. My rutabagas are better than they've ever been, and so are my onions. So with failures come successes, and keeping that in mind is important. To spend some time this afternoon. I already got a bunch of Jello cups in the fridge for kids snacks. Just trying to restock some convenient, easy snacks for us. If you haven't seen me make those before, let me grab them. Take these little 4-ounce mason jars and make Jello per the instructions. I pour them in these mason jars. I just reuse old lids that we have used from seasons past, put a ring on them, set them in the fridge to set, and the kids will just kind of take these at leisure, and then they know to just put everything in the kitchen sink, and we'll wash and refill, put them back in the fridge. We usually rotate between Jellos and puddings. Sometimes we will do a batch of Jello and a batch of pudding, have those in the fridge, but these are great. The kids put these in their lunch boxes for school. They bring them for school snacks. My husband brings them to work with him, but when I make them for my husband specifically, I tend to put them in like jam jars or half pints, just because they're a little bit bigger. Or these are really fun to make parfaits in as well, or things like that. You could do Jello or yogurt, fresh berries, things like that, and make it like a little dessert cup for your kids to bring to school for a treat, or your husband to bring to work, things like that. I've done that in the past as well. I haven't done those recently. Maybe we should make some of those, but these are in the fridge, and these are going to set. I got 24 of these in the fridge. So that thing I want to do today is get some tomatoes prepped for the freezer. I don't have quite enough right now to do a batch with anything, so I just want to share with you guys how I get these prepped and in the freezer for me to use for later dates. Still at the beginning of tomato season here. I know it's late in the season for a lot of other people, but here in zone 4B, I've only been getting tomatoes out of the garden for about a week, maybe a week and a half. But these ones are ready to go. I have another batch up on the counter. Those will be ripe in a couple days. I'll probably end up having to put those in the freezer as well before I get another batch out of the garden. That's good to do some canning with. the batch that I got out of the garden yesterday, so these are gonna take a couple days to ripen. But I want to do a double check just to make sure that none of these are as ready as I think they are. Okay, so for these, all I'm going to do, I'm going to cut the tops off. You can cut them in half like this. Some people will squirt out the seeds here and the juice in a separate bowl. I'm not going to do that. This right here where this green part is, that's the core of your tomato. Ideally you want to get that out, so you can go back and just take out that core, and you want it to look more like this. But these ones are my Amish pastes, and these are regular Romas, so you can see the size difference here. This is my first year growing Romas, and I knew that Romas only put on, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm still very new to this, but I'm pretty sure that Romas only really put on one set of fruit. They don't just continuously produce like slicing tomatoes can. So I greatly underestimated the amount of plants that I was going to need for a year's worth of tomato products for my family. So I don't think it's gonna be that great of a year for me. I'm really gonna have to prioritize what I want to make with my tomatoes. So I know I'm gonna have to make some spaghetti sauce, some pizza sauce, and salsa. That's really where I'm going to set my focus. Luckily, I had a great tomato year last year, the best I've ever had actually. So I have a lot of other tomato products on my shelf that I can fall back on that I don't have to make this year. One of those being crushed tomatoes. I made a massive batch of sloppy Joe mix last year because I had such a large bumper crop. I needed to find new things to use it with, and we absolutely love that sloppy Joe mix. If I can find that video, I'll link it down below. I have a couple other tomato products. I did tomato juice last year as well, so a lot of different things I'm not gonna have to do this year, but it's good when you have a bumper crop. Use it and preserve it, even if that means you have a ton of extra stuff that you're not gonna use in a year's worth, because you might run into a situation like me where now this year I'm really having to make sure that I'm getting what my family's gonna use most. That's most important for me on the shelf. You have to make those tough choices. I think that's gonna be the year I'm in, but who knows? Like I said, it is still early in the season, so I could be surprised. I feel like I always go through this where I think it's gonna be a bad year, and then things actually start happening. I'm going, okay, it's not gonna be as bad as I thought. So I'm going to take just a regular old Ziploc bag and throw these in here. If you've watched in seasons past, I will just core them out and throw them into plastic like Walmart bags that you get when you go grocery shopping, and then I'll just dump those in the freezer. I had tomatoes sit like that in my freezer for a full year, or almost a full year, and they were still completely fine. They were perfect once they were canned. You could not tell that they had been in the freezer for a year. So if you don't want to waste a Ziploc freezer bag and you just want to throw these into a plastic grocery shopping bag and throw it in your freezer, go for it. That's totally fine. So I have these. Oh, I also I have this very sad looking pepper. It was meant to be a bell pepper, but it definitely got cross-pollinated, which happens. But my peppers are also not doing very well this year. So it's been a rough garden season. It feels like once I tackle one issue, a new one arises. So I don't think my peppers are gonna do too well this year, but it is early, it can make a change. So I've been kind of savoring my peppers because I know I'm going to want them more specifically to can salsa and to throw into my pizza sauce. So I'm just going to dice this up and put this in a separate bag. If you don't want to quote unquote waste another plastic bag, what I did last year is I put just like this in Ziploc bags in my freezer. I put tomatoes, onions, and peppers. You put a little bit of garlic in there, and I just used them as fresh salsa kits, or I would dump them into my crock pot and cook them down for fresh pasta sauce or pizza sauce, and they were really versatile. We did really like them. but it was really convenient. So actually, what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, just like this, throw it in here, and that way when I'm ready to make pizza sauce, I know that I have a bag with at least 1 pepper in it, and I can put this in my pizza sauce. I like to put peppers in my pizza sauce. I think it adds a little extra flavor and a little extra vegetable in there. So this is perfect. This is gonna go right in the freezer, and it'll be there for when I am ready to preserve pizza sauce. I can even make this into salsa if I wanted to. So lots of options here, but this goes in the freezer for a later date.
Close, it starts to end up on the brink. I tried so hard, but all these scars, they cut so deep, I bleed. I fell so fast from heaven, it's like someone clipped my wings. Now I'm falling.